Well, Rob, Manchester United have found a magic money tree from somewhere. Part of the overhaul at Carrington, I guess, is the discovery of all of this money. I mean, can you tell us and enlighten us, where are they getting this money from, and how much of a surprise is it that they've been this active?
Yeah. I mean, it's jokes aside, it's a fair question because it wasn't that long ago that Sir Jim Radcliffe was talking about the club being bust at Christmas. So it's obviously a fair question. I mean, I think United always felt that they had the money to do a couple. They did Mateus Cunha very, very early, and Embuemo took a little bit longer. But again, they were always kind of confident of getting that deal over the line. In terms of the surprising one for me has been Sesko, but there is a reason why they've been able to do that. They've had a little bit of an injection of cash from sources that they weren't really expecting. They weren't expecting Anthony Elanga to go to Newcastle for 50 odd million quid, and that raised about 6 million. They weren't expecting Alvaro Fernandez to go to Real Madrid. That also brought in a bit of money via a sell-on clause. The big one really was Marcus Rashford. I think there was a feeling at the start of the summer that would drag on and on and on, and it might be a deadline day thing. They were pleasantly surprised that deal with Barcelona got done and over the line relatively early. Obviously, there's no loan fee attached, but they're kind of estimating that it's saving them around 40 million euros in wages every year, which, around sort of 12 million pounds, which is a significant number to get off the books. They've also negotiated relatively kind payment plans with Cunha and Embuemo, so all of that money isn't due up front right away. It's all staggered payments, so they're going to pay a lot of that further down the line. And basically what happened is all that fell into place for them to have a number in mind for Sesko, and they were able to convince Sesko that United was the place for him rather than Newcastle. Once that happened, he had then informed RB Leipzig that they had to negotiate with United and not with Newcastle, put Leipzig on the back foot a little bit, and United were able to do that deal within sort of 2 bids. Now, United were saying that if Leipzig had held firm and created sort of bidding war between Man United and Newcastle, that United could not have kept bidding and bidding and bidding. They would have had to pull out at some stage. But because Sesko put a little bit of pressure on Leipzig to say, look, this is where I want to go, they were able to do it. I think we're now right at the limit of what United can spend in this window without bringing other funds in. But there are an awful lot of players now at Old Trafford who are surplus to requirements. You've got Garnacho, Antony, Jadon Sancho, Malacia, Rasmus Højlund is another one. So I think there is an expectation that they may be able to go back into the market at some stage, providing that they can bring in fees for some of those players. So I think it's been a good window so far. Positive. I think certainly the fans think it's relatively positive. There could be more to come though.
Yeah, you mentioned obviously a lot of players need to go out. I'm interested in how you think Amorim is managing that situation, because there's been a lot of talk about cultural reset at Manchester United and trying to create a more positive, just a winning environment basically, and have that togetherness and that unity again. When you've got a bomb squad like Chelsea had last summer and they're training away from the rest of the first team, that can become quite corrosive quite quickly if those players aren't moved on or it's not managed in the right way. What sense do you get of how Ruben Amorim's handling that at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously he's handled it in a different way than, say, we've seen Pep Guardiola do it at City, because again, Jack Grealish was obviously not part of his plans and didn't go to the Club World Cup. But the minute that City started training again at the CFA, Jack Grealish was back with the first team. He was at an open training session with the rest of the squad. And so part of the group, if not actually part of the group, if you know what I mean, Amorim has gone completely the other way and said to Garnacho, Malacia, Antony, Sancho, you're just not part of my plans, and also you're just not going to train with us. Before they went on tour to the US, United, the first team were coming in the morning, doing everything they needed to do, disappearing off in the afternoon, and then the bomb squad, so to speak, were allowed to come in the afternoon, so they weren't having any kind of contact with the first team squad. The same again after they've come back from the US, completely separate training schedules, not with the squad at all. There is a slight worry that the way that Amorim has treated them, particularly Garnacho, because he's the biggest asset that they've got in terms of players who could go out, does his treatment of Garnacho lower his value? And say Chelsea, obviously Chelsea are interested, and I would expect that deal to to go through at some stage. But Chelsea would have every right to come to United and say, well, actually, you might value him at 50 million quid, but we're going to give you 10 because what else are you going to do with him? He only wants Chelsea. It's not up to us to pay the money that you want. It's up to you to accept a bid that you find acceptable. So we're going to start really, really low, which I guess is natural from Chelsea's point of view. In terms of what it does to the squad, we've not heard anything that it's been kind of disruptive so far. But you're right, the longer these things go on, all these players have got different friends in the changing rooms and dressing room and things, and it does become a problem. The one thing that we were told when we were away in the States with United was the emphasis. Obviously, there was emphasis on what they did on the training pitch and games, but the big emphasis was about team spirit and morale within the group. And all the players were encouraged to eat together more. They were encouraged to walk around their training base in Chicago more, go out in the evenings for walks together, go shopping, go to coffee shops. They organised a team dinner where they were all expected to kind of walk there together. Another evening where they were all given time off. The staff expected them to kind of break off into groups and go their separate ways, but the players decided they were all going to go to a restaurant together as a group, which the staff obviously loved. So there is that feeling of kind of togetherness right now. But you're right, that the longer it goes on with, Garnacho, Antony, Sancho, Malacia in particular, the more difficult it gets. And the real problem comes if they're still here beyond the deadline, because then, United are really backs against the wall then. Like, what do you do with Garnacho on September the 2nd if that move to Chelsea hasn't materialised? Do you bring him back in? Do you kind of stick him out in the cold on the training pitch, training with the academy kids? That's when the decision becomes really, really tough. I think for right now, it's all right, but it really relies on that. This hardline approach really relies on Amorim or United getting those 4 players out as quickly as possible.
I mean, another reason to do that, of course, is that they don't have any European football this season, so much fewer games coming up. How do you think that is going to help them? I mean, it can kind of go one or two ways, can't it? But, I guess optimistically from a United point of view, I'm thinking Chelsea finishing 10th next season, they won the league. And that not having that European football can be a big benefit, especially, I guess, for someone like Amorim, who, of course, didn't have a pre-season. He came in the middle of the campaign, didn't have time to train. He can't complain about that this time, can he? He's going to have 3 weeks a lot of the time this time.
Yeah, and it's funny you should mention that Chelsea season, because that specific example was mentioned to us on tour a lot by United staff, that it can't be underestimated how important or how big a deal it is not to have European football, that you get an entire week essentially to prepare for a Premier League game. You have extra rest, you have extra recovery, you have extra time to prep games. You've got days in the week where you can give players days off to spend with their family, or even, go to Spain or go to Portugal for 48 hours. It opens up a whole world of possibilities for Man United. Now, they're never going to say, oh yeah, we're happy that we're not in Europe. Obviously not, because they'd rather be in Europe. But now they're not. They have to use it to their advantage. And I think it is a big deal. The one flip side of that, though, is the squad. And the squad, even with those 4 players who are probably going to leave, the squad is quite bloated in certain areas. And you can tell that it is a little bit of a concern for Amorim in the way that he answers some questions. And there was one in particular about Kobbie Mainoo, who is in a World Cup year. Obviously, he needs to play games. He needs to play to get in the England squad for the World Cup. Didn't really play at the end of last season, and I think played a minute at the end of that Europa League final, which shows you where he was at the end of last season. And Amorim was asked about Mainoo, and he sort of said, I've got big plans for him. He's fantastic midfielder. He's got great feet. No one can do the things that Kobbie can do. And then right at the end says, but there's only going to be 1 game a week and there's a lot of competition. So we'll have to see. And it was almost a warning to those kind of players around the fringes of his team, the likes of Mainoo, maybe players like Agate, possibly, who had fallen out of favour before the Europa League final. All these players who will think that they deserve to start every week. If the team is winning, they're going to find it really, really difficult to get in, because there is only 1 game a week. It's possible that United could play 45 games next year, which means that some players are probably going to have to sort of play, 20, 25. And you wonder whether 25 games for a player like Kobbie Mainoo at his age is going to be enough. And that can cause problems in the dressing room if those players don't handle that in the right way. So obviously positive that Amorim gets more time on the training pitch, more rest, more recovery for the players, but also you do have to manage the squad in a different way, because obviously all players want to play, and there just aren't going to be enough games for lots of those players to kind of fulfill their ambitions.
Yeah, not so many games, but they might not be done in the market. There's obviously still some chat about a goalkeeper, Donnarumma specifically, and obviously also a big money move for a Brighton midfielder. What can you tell us about those two potential deals?
Yeah, I mean, two players, Carlos Baleba at Brighton and Donnarumma at PSG, who they've kept an eye on. I mean, the Donnarumma one, I imagine that United didn't think at the start of the window that he was kind of attainable, but whatever's played out at PSG with him kind of falling out of favour, and it looks like he's going to be kind of out in the cold a little bit, would open up that opportunity. United have kind of told us previously that they want to move away from deals like that with the big money older signings like Varane and Casemiro. Donnarumma would be a kind of similar deal to that, but done in the right way with the right contracts and the right terms. You can understand why, because of how difficult Onana has found it at times over the last 2 years, why United would possibly look at that. And they have looked to keepers this window, because they made a loan bid for Emi Martinez all the way back in sort of early July. They got knocked back. So it's obviously an area of the team that they feel like they could upgrade. I think the big one, though, is in midfield, because United have revamped their forward line. They've obviously gone into the window thinking we need to score more goals. They've done that with Cunha, Mbeumo and Sesko. But there is a big hole in that midfield still. With those three players coming in, it means that Fernandes is going to have to play as one of those two sort of deep-lying midfield players with one next to him. And at the moment, the options are Kobbie Mainoo, Agate and Casemiro. All great players in their own right, but not particularly mobile, any of them. They're not particularly energetic box-to-box midfielders who can get up and down the pitch. And it does feel like Man United need a kind of player like, you talk about that Chelsea team, or the team that Conte had. They had Kante in there, who just all over the place. He played like two men half the time, and United need someone with that kind of energy in that midfield. And obviously, Baleba would offer that. Whether that deal is doable in this window, I'm not sure. I think a lot of that would depend on whether United get a lot of money back for the likes of Garnacho and Højlund in particular. If they could raise 100 million from those two players, which United feel that they can, whether that's possible or not, we'll have to wait and see. But if they could raise 100 million and then put that down on the table for Brighton, I think that would give Brighton a decision to make. So maybe they're not winning the market, and maybe if they can get that deal over the line.
Don't you think, Rob, that, I mean, you mentioned the 100 million figure, because that's what's doing the rounds, because I think, Brighton from their point of view seem to value him in the same sort of way as Moises Caicedo. And I think Baleba's a really, really good player. I really like the look of him. I can see the fit at United. I think he could become a top-class central midfield, world-class central midfield player. But do you really think he's done enough at this stage in his career to justify that kind of valuation? Would United not be... you're talking about United being a little bit more sensible in the market these days. Would that not be overpaying 100 million for Baleba at this stage of his career?
Yeah. I mean, do I personally think he's a £100 million player? No. But I think players' value is determined by his value to the team that are trying to sign him. And I think Amorim will look at him as maybe the key to unlock that entire team, because there's no point having Cunha and Mbeumo and Sesko up front if you're just getting run through in the middle week after week, and you're losing 4 or 5-2 because you just can't defend those spaces and you haven't got the energy to kind of cover the ground in midfield. United have obviously put a premium on players with Premier League experience. Baleba has that, although not a massive amount of it. I can understand why United are attracted to him. Do I think he's a £100 million player? On the face of it, probably not. Is he worth 100 million to United in that team? I think you could probably argue that he is. He's obviously a risk, but then every signing is. And, I would say the same about Sesko. You mentioned Sesko could hit the ground running and be absolutely fantastic next season. He could also turn out to be another Højlund who struggles for 2 years, because it's really difficult for young strikers in particular to adapt to the Premier League. So I can understand why United might want to put £100 million down for Carlos Baleba. Do I think it's actually going to happen? I would be surprised, but I wouldn't rule it out at this stage.
And just finally, Rob, obviously, as you said, you were on tour with United. Did you get a sense about any internal targets for the season of how Amorim's going to be judged? I don't think anybody's expecting Man United to win the league, but is it Champions League qualification? Is it win a trophy of some description? What are the targets you think he's being set?
I think Amorim himself will know the value of winning a trophy. I mean, he mentioned that in his first ever press conference, that he knows that trophies buy you a little bit of time. And with no European football, he would be daft not to really have a proper crack at the Carabao Cup and the FA Cup, because there's no real need to rotate and swap players in and out for those competitions. It was interesting with the aims, because usually when you ask players on tour at pre-season about aims, they kind of fudge the answer a little bit. They don't ever give you a straight answer. Whereas we sat down with Mason Mount at the team hotel in Chicago on one of the first days on tour, and he was asked that question, and he said it's Europe. So he's not talking about top four in Champions League. He's not talking about trying to win the title. He's talking about trying to get back into European competition next year. And I think United are realistically looking at a top 6 or 7 finish. At top 6, I think if you offered Man United top 6 right now, they would bite your hand off, because that would have them back in Europe, back sort of in and around the top places. It would mean a massive improvement from finishing 15th last year. And I think that if all the signings work out, if Mbeumo and Cunha and Sesko work out, they can maybe get one more in. I think that is realistic. I think anything less than 6th, I think, even though that would be an improvement on what happened last year, I think questions would start to be asked about Ruben Amorim. But for now, it's positive in the group. The fans are positive about the window that they've had. Obviously, all that gets exploded when they get beaten by Arsenal on Sunday. But you never know. Maybe they get a good result against Arsenal. They've got Fulham and Burnley straight after that. Start the season well. The optimism grows. You never know. But I think top six will be their aim this year.
I think both teams would probably take a draw from Sunday and move on, and kick the can down the road. But we'll wait and see. We'll both be there.